Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, taking a fun and interesting video for you guys today, and one that's going to get slightly technical. That is because I am talking about a work-in-progress NES Recomp tool made by MStan. And if you're not aware, that is something that's going to be recompiling the actual assembly code to something that is readable and runnable by a modern machine. And even though we have NES emulation, something like this is going to be a ton of interest to a lot of people, and for me specifically for one very important reason, which I'll get to in just a moment. But this video, again, is going to get technical because we're going to be talking about what assembly code truly is, what I mean when I talk about writing to the bare metal versus actually using some sort of operating system or other obscuring layer to run games. But this stuff definitely gets deep, and it is one of the more fun aspects of these static recomps in my opinion. So it'll definitely be a fun video to kind of do a deep dive into. And again, if there's a tool out there that will allow for static recompilation of NES games, it's going to allow for a lot of modability and a lot of fun in the future. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But let's get the assembly topic out of the way first so you understand exactly what I'm talking about here. Assembly language coding is not the same thing as coding in the way you would think about it if you're on C or any other modern language. This is writing to the bare metal, which is basically saying it is coded specifically for the hardware inside of an NES. It is not useful code for anything else versus if you do something like decompile a game written on a modern piece of hardware that's basically instantaneously usable almost anywhere else. Assembly code is a very strange language, and honestly when I look at it, even my head starts to hurt a little bit. So as we take a look at the actual repo here, you're going to see it's taking the 6502 code, bringing that over to C, and then to an x64 architecture and instruction set, so any modern CPU will be able to run something like this. And if you're to try to manually do this by hand, statically recompile or even decompile assembly code, you have to go through all of the different information. This is like trying to count the grains of sand on a beach. It is absolutely Charlie work, for lack of a better term, which leads me into the next comment on this project is yes, this is being automated with the aid of development tools that would be considered AI. Now, before you get too angry about that, that would be the prescribed methodology to do something like actually statically recompile assembly code. And nobody in the real world will be doing this by hand at this point in time, even though you can technically do it that way. And just think of it this way, when people are using Ghidra, a very popular decompilation tool to try to get back to source code, a lot of that is automated as well. I would never say to anyone, hey, you should just sit there and manually decompile or try to recompile something like assembly code and do it 100% with your own fingers. That would just be an absolute disaster. It would be like just basically trying to build a house with nothing but a spoon. Maybe you could do it, but it wouldn't be the prescribed methodology. And you'll see here there is mapper support for a decent amount of the mappers that would be included on the NES or Famicom. But don't think this is going to run 100% of NES games anytime soon. It is still in active development. Some of the games seem to run like 95% of the way they should. Some games seem to be just basically in the rudimentary stages of trying to actually get them to run. But one of the most exciting things about this project, at least for me personally, is it has a full text override system. So as opposed to having to go into the ROM to do translations, it's going to have a piece of software that would allow you to actually change the text and translate games without having to get into the ROM hacking. And for Xanadu, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I will admit right now, I have legit never played this game, and I played a ton. It can be used, and that's something, think of it this way, it would allow a lot more translations to be done quicker if people didn't have to go into the NES ROMs and then try to actually amend the text involved to get it to read on the screen, because half of the trouble of a translation, or sometimes even 3/4 of the trouble, isn't actually getting a human to translate from Japanese to English or any other language. It's actually getting out of the formatting correct and having to go into the ROM, figure out how the text is encoded, and then being able to change it. So if you had a quote-unquote easy mode to be able to add human translations into NES ROMs, that would be a 10 out of 10 amazing thing. Let's go into the first soundtrack sample so you can hear what the audio quality is like coming out of the NES Recomp tool. We'll come back, I'll talk more about where this project could go in the future. Considering I never played Xanadu before, I don't know what the audio is supposed to sound like, so if you have, you leave me a comment down below. And why am I showing Mystical Ninja starring Goemon on N64? That is because this is also a static recomp, and it's doing the exact same thing as something like the NES Recomp tool is doing, at least in theory and practice. It is statically recompiling the entire game at runtime so that you're able to run it on a new platform. So when you hear stuff static recomp talked about on the channel here or elsewhere, just know that the NES Recomp tool is basically doing the exact same functions. It is converting the code at runtime and everything else to be able to run on different target hardware. And you'll see on the architecture side here, getting a little bit nerdy, basically it takes the NES ROM and it's going to create an executable for that, and it's going to basically take all the assembly code, bring it to C, then bring it to x64 architecture, so that when you double click the game executable, everything is linked together, everything is ready to run, and you just sit down and play the game like it was meant for PC in the first place. And like I said, NES, not really an area where you're going to get a lot of visual enhancements or other improvements when it comes to running it via static recompilation, PC porting, or even something like emulation. You just get the game as it was made, and even though you can improve a few things, this isn't going to be the night and day difference as seeing something like an N64 game getting recompiled or ported to PC. But it definitely would allow for modders to go in and more accurately be able to actually deal with the code versus actually having to go into the ROM and ROM hack things. Because if you've never actually seen any of that work done before, you're basically sitting around with a text editor or a tool, changing memory addresses to try to get something different out of the game. It is obscured a ton, and it really makes work way more difficult, because I'm pretty sure if you asked everybody out there, translators, modders, or otherwise, if they wanted something that was way more readable than just the hexadecimal code and its sometimes translation, I'm sure they would all answer in the affirmative. It's one of those things. I am a filmmaker for a living, and the easier the tool is for me to work, the less I think about my tools, and the more I think about my work. And that is the reality of something like this. The less time you actually have to spend fighting with the thing that you're trying to work on, and the more time you get to spend actually working on it, the more things you get in the future quicker and better. And that really is why this is something I wanted to talk about specifically for that text replacement tool, because that could mean cutting down stuff like translations by 50% time-wise. One of those things that takes the same amount of time to translate it no matter what you're doing, but actually getting the text into the game, and that is probably even the more consuming part of things, because some NES games that do have Japanese don't have a ton of text, so maybe it would only take somebody a day or two to translate the entire script over, but then it might take a modder something like a month to actually get it into the game. But going back to the original Super Mario Brothers here, definitely a fun test to be able to see one of the most iconic games running on something like static recompilation. It's also going to be your next soundtrack sample, because to me, I would say the audio is maybe 90 to 95% buttoned up, but it sounds like there's a few sound effects missing. But again, this isn't a finished project. It is still in development, so I'll have to wait to see where it goes. But listen, and I'll be right back. So a very close approximation of what the game should sound like, but I would say it needs a little bit more work there. But again, because it is in active development, I am sure it will get that work. And as far as the automation of tools like this are concerned, again, you wouldn't really say to anybody, you should completely disassemble and then port over assembly code. There's been tools available for a long time that basically automate a lot of that workflow process. So that would basically be the prescribed methodology on how to do this, whether you were sitting in an office somewhere making a big salary, or if you're sitting at your computer at home making these things for fans. And I know it can be a sensitive topic, and I am very clear when I say I don't want any AI in paid games. I don't want anyone losing jobs for it. When you're doing something like statically recompiling NES games just so you can have some improvements and give people fun to be able to enjoy for themselves, and it would be done that way anyway. I don't really see any issue with this one, but I'm sure someone's going to find a very big one in the comments and email me and tell me that I should basically just stop talking about this. I can be a little bit feisty sometimes, but short of that, we are done. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.